Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. So my guest today is Peter Lawrence. Peter is one of the founders of a place called Wythe Hotel in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is, for those not in the area, part of New York City, and where we're actually filming today. And it's a pretty awesome place. So we're going to talk about the journey that he's had in bringing this incredible vision to life, but also take a step back and sort of explore his personal journey a bit as well. So awesome to be hanging out with you.
Nice to have you.
So we walk in here, and you may be able to see it a little bit reflected here, but this is a stunning location. Absolutely beautiful building in an older part of Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And you've made some really strong choices about what you were going to do and what you weren't going to do when you decided to create a new place in the neighborhood. I'm curious, tell me a little bit about sort of the process of you deciding, okay, we're here, we want to open something here, and this is how we want to go about it.
Sure. We really felt like there was a great big hole in Brooklyn in that there wasn't a hotel that represented what Brooklyn was, is, and is becoming. And one of my favorite stats was that if Brooklyn stood alone, it would be the fourth largest city in the country. And so for a place with that much history and just that amount of population to not have a real representation in that area seemed wrong.
Yeah.
So we actually sat down with zoning maps, and we cross-referenced subways so we could be close to a subway station, with manufacturing zones, and we stumbled across this particular building and fell in love with it, and honestly spent 5 years terrified of the location because it was further than we had thought it could be from a subway station to make people comfortable coming to visit. As it turns out, the building and the location have, fixed those problems for us very well, which is
in hindsight, you're like, oh, that was brilliant.
Yes.
I can't believe we had such foresight.
It's my favorite thing when people come in and shake my hand and say, this location is fabulous. Lots of planning.
So, well, you had a really interesting journey though, because you guys bought the building, and it wasn't like you bought the building and said, okay, let's do some construction and open up. There was a journey that happened between then and the time you actually opened. So take me through that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, we were searching when the world was flying high and there was financing available for this kind of
like mid-2000s.
Strange, on the edge of the world, speculative hotel from three guys who've never done it before. And we bought the building just as the world started to shake a bit, and then the world really fell apart. And turned out to be, I think, one of the very best things for the project. We had 2 years where there was no hope of getting any financing for it.
But you own the building at this point.
We own the building. So we
you're
were
just sitting here and it's vacant, or?
We're sitting here vacant,
Right.
yes.
And was this kind of just like an old beat up building in New York City, or was there stuff going on?
It had been a functioning textile factory for the last 60 years, but probably at least for a decade before we came along, they weren't making anything here. Everything had been sent out. So a very nice old guy owned it, and he had inherited the company from his father-in-law. He was selling the business to put money into a trust for his grandkids. So it was a very personal transaction. No, we got to live in the building for 2 years, not literally, but we spent a lot of time here. We had a couple of guys here just stripping things out slowly. We got time to build a couple of model rooms and really set everything from the height of the floors and the sills to the size, and get to live in those a little bit too. So by the time we actually got financed, we took 16 months from then to opening our doors, which we're all very proud of.
Ridiculously fast.
Unheard of, and especially with hotels.
Right.
But no, it gave us lots of time to get our permits organized, to do lots of research.
Right.
And then I went back to paid school, with, I went and helped open a hotel in the city called the Jane, with Eric Good and Sean McPherson, who have a bunch of other, real boutique properties in the city that are based in buildings that have a fabulous history, like the Maritime, already. So that was a great education for me. I spent about a year there with them and did everything from literally making beds and working as a housekeeper to running their front desk. So it was a a good insight, which
is
served us
all
well.
right. So, which is kind of an interesting thing, right? Because, okay, here's a guy. You're about to open your own hotel, beautiful, hotel, flagship hotel, and you're working somebody else's hotel, changing beds and working the front desk.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who wouldn't go there.
I guess it always seemed exactly the right thing for me to do. There were definitely days when I came home being like, what the hell am I doing? And my wife very wisely would tell me, baby, you're not a housekeeper, you're an industrial spy. It's fine. So, you balance both of those things. But no, I couldn't have paid for a better education. I'm still very thankful. I was totally straight with those guys from the beginning. I'm coming to spy on you a little bit. And I think in the end they would say they got more than their money's worth from me, and I certainly got a great education from them.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's so interesting for me. When I was, in a very past life, I was a lawyer. But I knew I was going back into sort of the world of entrepreneurship and fitness for a solid chunk of years. But I didn't know the industry all that well. So I mean, when I made a jump from 6 figures to making $12 an hour as a personal trainer. Similar reasons. I was like, I could just open a facility, but I want to know on the most basic, like, service level, what's the human interaction? Sure. What are the fundamentals, so that I could really understand the psychology and then build around there. And it was, and I did that for long enough where I felt like, okay, now I'm just informed in a very different way when I finally started to open my own facilities.
Yeah. No, I think it's imperative you understand we have 200 people that work here now, and I don't understand all of their day-to-days and what they're really doing, but I know what it's like to be a housekeeper for a 10-hour shift. I know that that's not easy, and I know that that's generally thankless, and I also know that if those guys are doing a great job, they are the heart and soul of the whole operation. So yeah, the more informed you are, as you say, from a psychological level, but also just from a nuts and bolts operational level, the better viewpoint you have on the whole picture.
Yeah, which really brings the conversation around to maybe the notion of culture building. So you've got a hotel here, but fundamentally you've got a community.
Absolutely. That was the goal.
Yeah, and a big part of that, to a certain extent, it rises and falls on the culture that you create in here. Tell me a little bit about how you've explored, creating and building the culture.
We wanted to be exactly a hub for the community that lives and eats and plays and works in the neighborhood, with the hope that was the biggest reason people would want to come and stay with us, because they would feel immersed in all of this sort of fabulous creative energy that's being expressed around us. So I live in Brooklyn, and one of our partners, both live in Brooklyn, but there were just two of us at the beginning. And we were searching for a food and beverage partner to run the restaurant, and we found our now partner Andrew Tylo, who in many ways solved that equation for us all in one fell swoop. Jed and I knew we would win some points by doing a really thoughtful reconstruction, renovation of the existing building. But we knew we needed a person who'd really been embedded in the culture of the neighborhood for much longer than we had. And Andrew opened his first restaurant here nearly 20 years ago and has been on the forefront of that Brooklyn food scene. And he has a very similar viewpoint to us as to what we were trying to accomplish. He was also astonished that there wasn't a hotel in Brooklyn that really felt like Brooklyn. He had been searching for a way to accomplish that in Williamsburg for some time, so was happy to find us. And he's not into it for the next 2 years, he's into it for the next 10.
Right.
And
how important was that when you were putting together the team? How important was longevity to you? Because it's become really fashionable to open boutique hotels, and as soon as it's stable, then and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Being one of the astonishing things for me is how many people come and ask us what we're doing next.
Because it's like 16 months you're open, boom, you're really successful. It's beautiful.
It's great. But they don't know me.
No.
They were only looking at this project.
Yeah.
And the three of us have never done this before. So our track record is exactly 9.5 months long at this point, and it looks great.
But one for one, which is
One for one, for sure. But you're right, there does seem to be that mentality. There's a very successful group of people who build them and create these fabulous environments, and then they're off to the next project.
Right.
And there seem to be very few people who are involved in that whole process and then want to stay and operate the thing for X amount of time. And both of my partners, that's what they do with everything they do. They find the project, imagine the project, put the team together, get it open, and then
right.
stay on board and operate it as their own thing. Makes a huge difference in how you think about everything from day one all the way through to the end.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it has to change everything, and especially circling back to the idea of culture. You were kind of talking about, okay, fitting in with the culture of the community.
Yep.
But then when you've got to create the internal culture,
Sure.
Which then reflects on the experience that every guest here has every day.
Sure.
Longer term commitment from the people at the top has got to filter down in a million different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've only had my crew here for 10 months, and Andrew has brought a lot of people that have worked for him at some of his different places, and lots of those people have worked for him for nearly a decade. So yeah, he and I really share that idea that the staff needs to come first. And if they're, you have high expectations of the people that work for you, you give them all the tools they need to do a great job, and you give them a ton of support. If they, buying into it is the wrong phrase, but if they adopt the same ideals and the same challenges that you have, then the customers will all feel that, and then down the bottom, the money will take care of itself.
Right.
Everything is usually twisted around the other way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I think it is. So, in your situation, what are some of those driving ideals that kind of that you embrace and that you really want to live and breathe, and then have filtered through every piece of this?
We're in the hospitality business, and that word seems to have gotten lost somewhere. So, Andrew and I are both really excited that people are coming to stay with us in our house. He gets to cook food for them, which is obviously a huge part of the hospitality side of this. And then they put their trust in us that we're going to, give them a safe place, first of all, and then that it's going to be super comfortable and interesting and thoughtful in much the same way that those people would be coming into my home to come and visit with me. That's what we try and do. So I think part of that's feels like a Brooklyn thing, but only because we're a bit in the shadow of Manhattan, where it's sort of okay to not be quite so gracious or quite so warm, because just the volume of things.
You're saying that your typical Manhattanite is a little bit brusque, maybe?
Well, the typical Manhattan hotel employee, maybe, is a little less warm and friendly than I like to think that ours are. So that's a big part of it. We want people to really feel genuinely warm welcome from us when they first arrive. And our clientele is a reflection of the neighborhood. It's a wide range of people, ages and interests and everything else. So we don't care who you are and where you come from. We're just really happy and excited that you're here. And it's interesting, at the beginning you said deciding what we weren't going to do, which was something we spent a lot of time thinking about too. That we were going to be a limited service hotel in many ways, and we were going to concentrate very heavily on the food side of things, being spectacular, and not try and do fluffy slippers and robes, and we still don't do room service. So some of those things have worked fabulously well, and some of those things we're rethinking as we get to our second year. I don't know, does that answer your culture question?
No, I mean, it definitely does, because I think also you keyed in on, it's a matter of a combination of actually living whatever those ideals, like the values yourself, because no matter what employee manual you have for anyone, it doesn't matter if they see the owners walking around, like dumping on people, and they always follow that. But also, I think the concept of what you don't want is really important, and also getting really clear on what you want and also what you don't want, so that you understand sort of like this is what we're all about. And it's almost like the clearer you are with that and the clearer you establish it, the more you give both your employees and your potential guests something to say strong yes or a strong no to.
Exactly.
You're not going to be right for some people.
We're not going to be right for lots of
guests,
people, for sure.
But the ones that you're right for, you'll be like, hell yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so many people, when they're building something, the entrepreneurs, they get scared of making such strong statements. They kind of want to run it down the middle and just be okay with everyone.
Sure. No, and by choosing to do this project in this great old building, that whenever I was, which way do we go on this? That was my sort of touchstone, like always return. Like I know that that's 100% right, and we need to just make this building, sing to everybody that came in the way it did when we first walked in the door. And I think sometimes, depending on the business you're in, not everybody has that place of 100% certainty that they can return to and then let that inform other decisions that they make. So, yeah, between that and me being old enough to know that I can't learn so many new tricks and I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and I know I'm pretty good at that stuff, but I'm, never going to be good at running a Mandarin Oriental with a spa downstairs. I'm just not built for that, but this fits nicely.
So let's kind of explore though, because this is what you're doing now.
Right.
Let's take a step back in time. We go really far back in time. So we were introduced by a mutual friend.
Sure.
Who shared that, as school chums when you were younger.
Yes. And
Dungeons and Dragons mates.
Yes.
He would come up with the idea for a dragon, and then you would be the guy who would completely build it out and detail it and all this. And as he's telling me this, I'm thinking, I'm like, so he's pretty much doing the same thing now.
Yeah, no, we're definitely creating environments. This one's much less juvenile and a little less scary. So we're making progress.
No perils of life and limb.
No perils of life. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But no, Michael and I grew up in Australia and have both left Australian shores, which is a little sad about Australia. I think it's getting much better there, but when he and I grew up, it was something of a challenging place to break out of expectations.
Just culturally, or?
Yeah, just culturally. It's in many really, really good ways. It's fairly close to a socialist place, so there's lots of safety nets, and healthcare is good and basically free, and the education is great and basically free, at least compared to American standards. But it does come with this, everything's great. What do you want more for?
Right, don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. So it's a sad part of, you'll find lots of great Australians scattered across the world, and most of them end up going back at some point.
So was there a moment or an incident or an event for you that kind of made you say, I need to
Not
go?
A positive one. No, I was, so I started my hospitality career in five-star hotels in Melbourne, and then devolved very quickly to running great big nightclubs also in Melbourne, where the licensing laws let you serve alcohol until 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was really, at 25 years old, it was an incredibly fun education.
Right.
But fairly quickly after that, it's clear that it's an unhealthy way to spend the rest of your life. So no, I originally came to New York just to sort of put a real full stop on that part and see what was here.
So why New York?
I had a friend here, and I had a bunch of friends in London, and had traveled to both.
Could have gone either way.
Yeah, ended up here, and one of my dearest friends in the world, an old girlfriend of his, was pouring drinks at a bar downtown, and I went to visit her. She's like, I'm going back to Australia in a week. Do you want to keep my spot warm for me while I'm gone? And so I started pouring drinks there the next day, and the guy that had opened that ended up being my business partner in a couple of small restaurants, 2 in the city and 2 in Brooklyn. and we opened one on Washington Street in Dumbo. And my landlord there is now my business partner here. So that's sort of the quick connection between how we get all the way over here.
What were the are the restaurants still there?
No, all gone now. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's the restaurant world, especially in New York.
Yeah, that's the restaurant world. No, they were, the first one would have been 15 years old if it was still open, and it closed 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago. So no, we had a great run. Yeah.
So when you think about your why, what's driving you, and what has driven? I mean, obviously you're a risk. I mean, it's funny because hanging out, talking to you seem like very even keeled, right? We're having conversations, but clearly by the fact that you're running, like large clubs, at a young age, you leave your country at a young age. You open a series of new businesses that have, real estate, real commitments, overhead in a city, in a brand new city.
Sure.
There is a strong entrepreneur. There's a strong risk-taking side to you. And now, this is a pretty substantial venture. And like you said, 3 guys, 0 experience in the hotel side of things.
Right.
Boom, we're going to do it. We're buying a building. What drives you? What's the why behind this?
Well, for this one, it's, how can you walk away from that opportunity? No one is ever going to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, why don't you come and open a hotel? You've never done it before, right? So my business partner, Jed, has the means and thankfully is, has some real belief in me and in Andrew, obviously, and likes to challenge himself. And so he's never done this before, although he's a very accomplished real estate developer. He does lots of other things. This was a fun challenge for him, and that said, we're obviously all taking the process incredibly seriously, and we talked about having high expectations of our employees. I think we have even higher expectations of each other, and so the result is great, and the project as a whole is really fun, but the process of getting from the idea to the reality is necessarily got some torture involved if you want to end up with a great product. Because if you're not prepared to really fight and spit and scream for the things that you really think are important, then those things will get lost a little along the way, and making it sound much more dramatic than it really was. But I think there's a real balance there, and it's one of the things I really learnt with this is you can draw beautiful things and come up with fabulous ideas, but the real genius is having people who can take that and make it actually function and work, especially in an environment like a hotel, in a hotel room that gets very little respect in the short time that people are with us.
Yeah. So with your partners, I mean, you had a prior relationship with Jed. When you're doing something like this, there's, especially when, it's an interesting dynamic when you've got a relationship with somebody and you've got ideas, you've got certain level of experience, and then somebody also shows up with a pot of money and experience too, and also I've talked to so many entrepreneurs who have really mixed feelings about developing relationships where it's essentially like, okay, I'm going to put in some of my money, but fundamentally, this is other people's money, and I feel this sense of insane responsibility, and I have a really strong vision. Like I know what I want, but if somebody else is providing a lot of the funding for it, whether it's an institution or a VC or an individual, how much say did they get in the picture in my head? And how do I, what's that conversation in your head?
I'm very lucky. Jed's very accomplished and very smart, and the first one to admit he doesn't know anything about a particular subject, and all he needs you to do is prove that you're right. Now, he's going to do everything in his power to poke holes in your argument along the way, especially if he has a different position, but No, I think under his guidance, we did a really good job at the best idea wins. And that's, I had never really been through a process like that before, where you start value engineering things and you've really got to knuckle down and decide again, like, what are we not going to do, and what on the things of the list that we really have to do we now have to cross off to come in under our budget.
Right.
But no, he has real skills in that area of really pushing people and a good manner of doing it, because it's tough if you have an idea that you're really personally attached to sit in a room and have someone
tear it apart.
Yeah.
For the right reasons, but still.
Yeah, so if you do it for the right reasons and you can do it in the right way, then you can get your head to a point where it's like, okay, if this idea is really as fabulous as I think it is, then it needs to stand up to this kind of abuse. And if it gets through this, then you know what, it's going to become a reality, just not an idea anymore. So no, Jed really sort of led the charge on that process, which, as I said, wasn't always the most fun meetings, but at the end of it we knew, it was clear where we were going and why we were going there, and everybody, even though their idea might not have won out, was pretty happy that, okay, we're choosing this one this time.
No.
Yeah.
It's interesting they said as long as you can prove it.
Yeah, as long as you can prove it.
The first thing that popped into my head was something that there's a management professor named Roger Dean, who also wrote a book. He's big on design thinking. And I once heard him say the two most dangerous words to innovation are prove it. Because anything truly innovative can be proven in advance. So when I look at something like this, I mean, there's a lot of stuff which is kind of known about how to run a hotel and how to do certain things, but a lot of stuff also you had to lean into something where you couldn't prove it. So
and there's not a real model for this. There's a few places in the world that have popped up. Mama Shelter in Paris is one. It's a thing that really belongs where it is, but it's a long way from where tourists would normally want to go and find a hotel. And we're definitely one. And all the experts would tell us we were crazy. There's no market there. No one's going to come and stay in this crazy corner of the world that's a 10-minute walk from the nearest subway, and that subway only goes in one direction, and you're in Brooklyn, and etc. etc. It's one of the really nice compliments of this whole thing is that we get lots and lots and lots of industry people coming through and interested in what we're doing and why we made the choices we made. But yeah, that was the only way to prove this one, was to open the doors.
So it's like, to a certain extent, there are certain numbers or certain operations that you can say, okay. But then at some point, there's like a basket of things where it's just like faith, like, I trust you.
Yeah.
And you've got to take action on that and that alone.
Yeah. No, in my business, if you build it, they will come becomes a mantra for all sorts of things, whether you're opening a tiny little bar in Greenpoint or 70 rooms on the Williamsburg waterfront. I love about New York and lots of other places in the world, but New York's pretty good at it, is those off the beaten track gems that make you work a little harder to find them, but when you find them, you know that place is going to become part of your sort of vocabulary of your life, because you're going to eat there or drink there or play there or visit there often. That was my sort of solace when I got really worried about whether anyone really was going to turn up over here, that if we build something great and thoughtful, then that's something, and that was something I was responding to, that other people would also respond to that. But yeah, we tried for 2 years to prove it to someone to write us a check. No one was buying.
Yeah. So as you're going through this whole journey and lots of ups and downs and waiting and convincing and then opening something like this, you're also married, you have a family, you have kids.
Yep.
I'm always fascinated by the dynamic of entrepreneurs who are in a long-term committed relationship with other people.
Yep.
And are you open to sort of sharing a little bit about
Sure.
how that unfolds
Yes,
in the context of you
you're going to
building
have to call
this
my
big
wife
thing?
for corroboration of whatever I say, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a curiosity. How this dynamic of one person who's out there trying to build something extraordinary and taking some big risks,
Right.
but you got a family. What are the conversations like that with your significant other as you're along this process?
Yeah, no, she definitely bears the brunt and the weight of making sure our kids are great, you know, which for the most part they are, except when they're awful, but that's fine.
But that's called being kids.
That's called being kids, exactly. I don't know how it works for everybody else, but she signed up. You know, you have this amazing opportunity and you totally need to go and do it, and obviously if it goes really well, it can have a huge effect on, you know, our opportunities as a family. And thankfully she's a photographer and does a lot of work taking stills on movie sets, which is the kind of work she can do for a little while and love it, and then come back and really sort of be 100%
Right.
mom for a while again. So her having that flexibility makes it much easier for us, because she can do a little bit of that and feel like she's part of the non-mom human race, which I know gets a little crazy if you're just with the kids all the time. But no, I think, you know, it's kind of an impossible balance when you want to be a great mother and, you know, continue to keep your career going,
Right.
that you're generally going to feel like you're doing one of those things not as well as you would like to.
So, and what about on your side? I mean, that balance between wanting to be an engaged dad and husband, and also having this incredible passion to bring something extraordinary to life.
Yeah, it's I don't always manage that as well as I would like to. You know, obviously the hope is now, after the thing running 9 months, I'm not living here as much as I was for the first 3, and my wife is determined that continues, so that there's space for me and her and our kids more than there is now. So no, I am the first to admit that I lose sight of that. But you know, it's the great thing about a place like this. At a certain amount of time, it finds its own rhythm, and then I become somewhat irrelevant. If I've done my job well, I should at some point become somewhat irrelevant. If I've chosen the right people and set them up the right way and have given them the right expectations and they've taken those on board, then I should be able to step back, which I've never done successfully yet, so we'll have to come back and see if I can really do it. But
This sounds great in theory, though.
Sounds great in theory.
I know. I mean, because I'm friendly with a lot of parents who are also entrepreneurs and you know, committed, you know, partners to.
Right.
And it is, you know, everyone's looking for the easy answer. Everyone's looking for the, you know, use this tool or this strategy, and you know, to balance things out.
Right.
And it's you know, it's just a constant moving target. You know, it's my experience has been, and there are times where I'm completely out of whack and times where I'm in sync. But I think just a commitment to an awareness of whether you're like where your energy is, where your attention is,
Right.
and sort of, you know, like I've heard a long time ago, somebody once told me he has sort of a weekly check-in with his wife. So it's like every Sunday night, he's like, you know, 0 to 10. How'd I do this week?
Yeah,
and so he just sets that up,
for sure.
You know, so that he just they have a regular interval to revisit the issue instead of just really going so far down the rabbit hole and never coming back. When you finally have the conversation, everything's a disaster.
Yeah, no, if it gets to the point where it's too late because people are too exasperated or whatever the problem is, no, that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah.
Sort of, on some weeks it must be putting your head in the lion's mouth, but
right, but better to do it once a week in like a
For
smaller
sure.
lion's
Yes.
mouth.
Absolutely.
But then there's a flip side of that also, which is that, you know, how awesome is it to be able to show your kids
Sure.
that you can take risks, that you can build extraordinary things,
Yeah.
that you can imagine something that didn't exist
Yep.
and make it exist.
Yes. No, they've definitely been a part of the, they were running around here when it was a construction site, and we were, worried about them falling in holes. And they came and stayed. The first night we were open, there were 3 families that stayed here,
great.
mine and my 2 partners. And then we did 2 weeks of friends and family, and then we opened properly. But no, the kids have been here a bunch of times now, and it took us a while to explain to them that they couldn't go into all of the rooms after we'd opened, because they were used to having pretty
It's
free
not just
reign.
your playhouse.
It's not just your playhouse anymore. But no, it's yes, there's definitely a lovely perk. Every once in a while, my daughter or my son come just that, one of them and me as a sleepover and leave.
Oh, that's great.
And at home with the other kid, and that's a fun adventure for them to come to the hotel
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
hang out with their dad for one night. So there's some fun perks for them too.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So at this point, you're going on a year, almost a year?
Yeah, May the
10 months?
1st, so 10 months.
Right. Looking back, big surprises, or is everything just gone exactly as planned?
No, we were totally overwhelmed in the very best way with the response. We really were set up to do about half of the business that we thought we were set up to do half the business that actually walked in the door from the very beginning. So we had this lovely scramble early on to, we'd had this very calm, thoughtful training period for all of our staff, and then we suddenly needed to double them.
It's like, yeah!
Yes. So, no, the first 6 months I had a long list of like the very best problems you could ever wish for in a business like this. Just too much volume, and how do we keep up, and who do we need, and how fast can they be ready, and where are they coming from, and all of those kinds of things. No, we had faith from the very beginning that it would work, but we were pretty sure it was, wasn't going to happen overnight. We knew Andrew and the restaurant would become a neighborhood place very quickly, but we were pretty sure the rooms were going to take a year or 2 to really get to where we wanted them to be, and that happened in 3 months. So and then the bar up here too was imagined as a very sort of quiet little elegant thing for hotel guests. And in the spring and summer we have a line inside the lobby that snakes out down the street of people who are excited to come up and have a drink up here. So we found ourselves in the crowd control business as well, which was another place I wanted to return.
Right, problems we want to have though.
Yeah, problems I want to have, for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely been the biggest surprise. The other piece has been where people are coming from. We knew we'd get lots of friends and family from the neighborhood, and we knew we'd get some adventurous tourists, lots of Aussies and Italians and Norwegians for some reason, but sort of people that tend to travel well and are interested in places that are off the beaten track a little bit. But we're doing a ton of creative corporate business, which none of us really thought was here. But there's a ton of smaller businesses, and those people work here and live here and eat here and play here. But when they had clients come in, there wasn't a hotel that they felt comfortable representing them, and so they would send their clients into the city. And now they're all coming here, which is great because they're creative people, whether they're in movie production or fashion or architecture or graphic design or technology. They're generally doing interesting things, so they're sort of our favorite kind of guest.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's so cool when you plan, and then to just kind of like open yourself to the surprises.
Yeah. Good surprises. We like good surprises.
Well, that's the cool part.
Yeah.
Bad surprises, not so much. But they're going to happen to a certain extent. But
of course.
So, so the name of this is the Good Life Project. And so when I offer that phrase to you, to live a good life, what comes up?
That's a big question. I think, as we just talked about, I haven't reached it yet, but I think it's about balancing all of those things that we've talked about, right? Getting to go to work, most importantly with people that you have respect for and are excited to go and see what they're going to do today, on a project that you have some real connection to, and that you have some time for your family and for your soul as well, so that it's, you know, it's not all about work, and it's not all about goofing off, and it's not all about raising your kids, because I don't know that any of those things are a good answer. Yeah, it's tough, especially in a place, well, everywhere, but especially in a place like New York, where there's heightened expectations on how hard everybody should work. Balancing that out is a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one of the biggest challenges around a place like New York is there are so many external expectations that to just kind of step into your own and say, I need to do it my way.
Yeah.
When there's so many others to compare yourself to, and so many people looking at you and expecting certain things of you.
Yeah, it's I think you keep reminding yourself it's an imbalanced set of expectations. Then, yeah, New York's also full of all, you know, there's an example of everything, right? There's an example of how to do it this way or that way or the other way, and then lots of examples of exactly how not to do it as well. It's one of the things that my wife and I talk a lot about with our kids, is that I think New York teaches you very quickly it's just okay to be you. Because look at all these crazy people just being them. It's, you know, just figure out what works for you and stick with that, because in the end it's all you got.
Yeah.
I don't know that you learn that so quickly in other places in the world where there's...
Yeah, maybe not.
Anyway, I need to think more about a better answer to your question.
Yeah, the answer that comes is the right answer for this, but I've enjoyed the conversation so much, and enjoyed so much you hosting us in this absolutely stunning place. The White Hotel is,
Thank you.
I mean, it's so beautiful and so authentic to the neighborhood, and there's a vibe to it. There's an energy to it. As soon as you walk in the door, you know somebody cares about it, and it filters through. So gratitude for creating this space.
Thank you very much. It was good to have you guys here.
Thank you. So, and I'm Jonathan Fields. My guest has been Peter Lawrence, one of the founders of the White Hotel in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, aka the 4th largest city in the United States, signing off for Good Life Project.